Well, I'll mention one thing that they probably won't know how to operationalize today at all, but maybe 10, 20 years, right? Again, you are what you charge for. What do you charge for transformations? And it's the demonstrated outcome that your customers achieve. Because with transformations, inputs don't matter. It doesn't matter what food we give them. It doesn't matter even the experience they have unless it makes a difference in their lives, unless it moves them along the path. Generally not one life-transforming experience we have in a restaurant, but something that helps move them along the path of achieving their aspirations. And as you pointed out earlier, that the customer is the product, and therefore you need to charge for that changed customer. And that's charging based off of outcomes rather than inputs.
Their outcomes, the value of
their outcomes, yeah, not yours, not right, exactly, their outcomes. Because unless you align, with all offerings, unless you align what you charge for with what your customers value, right, you're not going to create as much economic value. And so what we need to align with transformations is our income with our customers' outcomes.
Yep. This episode is brought to you by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, co-author of The Experience Economy, Competing for Customer Time, Attention, and Money, and co-founder of Strategic Horizons LLP, Joe Pine. My man Joe, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I'm a little under the weather, so not the best, but unstoppable, absolutely.
I will try to take it easy on you, and thank you so much for continuing to holding true to our scheduled time today. I know I've been really looking forward to today's conversation, and I appreciate you powering through to be available for me and my listeners. So I'm talking to you today because Ed Doherty called you out, somebody who I have a lot of respect for. He said, this is a book you got to read. I dove into it. There's been this overarching narrative right now in our industry that our business model is broken. The restaurants of today are stuck in the 1905 business model. We're still in the service economy. We haven't quite recognized our value, in my opinion. So today, my hope is that by talking to you, we can help our listeners better understand their worth and how to build their business around their worth is my hope through talking with you today. But before we dive into a little bit about who you are in the experience economy, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with the success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Go beyond goods and services to staging experiences and guiding transformations for each one of your individual customers.
Yes. And I know this is the third rendition of your book. Did you get into transformation in the first rendition?
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's actually been there from the very, very beginning when I discovered the experience economy. Because I'm always asking what's next, and that's what came out as what's next.
Yeah, and you use a lot of these triggering terms like staging and acting, and I think when people first hear those things, they feel like that's fake. That doesn't feel natural. And I'm sure we're going to get into that. But before we kind of dive into the big picture of how you landed where you are today with your theory of the experience economy and the transformation economy, get us an idea of who you are. Like, how did you come to find yourself doing this work? I just want to understand who you are real quick.
Well, so I like to say I'm a geek from way back, but my wife will tell you I was really a nerd. I started programming computers in 7th grade, way back when. Decided to go to the computer industry, have an applied math degree, worked for IBM for 13 years, started in very technical jobs, and then moved up into management and strategy. And the sort of defining moment for me was when I read Stan Davis's book, Future Perfect. It came out in 1987, and Stan died last year, unfortunately. But when I read his book, as a strategic planner at IBM, it was like the heavens opened up and the angels sang, because it explained everything that I was seeing going on. And so one of the chapters in there was called mass customizing, right? So he coined this term, mass customizing. He told me he actually one day was, for thinking purposes, he just cut up a bunch of different words and was just pairing them together. And he got to where he paired mass and customization together and went, whoa, right? That's something. What would that be? And he realized that as the technology was bringing down the cost of customization, so that eventually you would be able to individually customize, which is something we only think of with craft production. But you could individually customize, but do it on a mass basis. Do it with low-cost, efficient operations with high volume. And so I worked on getting that into our plans and strategies at IBM. And as a reward for a project I did, more or less, they sent me to MIT for a year to get my master's degree. And I discovered that I had to write a thesis. And I immediately said, I'm going to write a thesis I can turn into a book. And then the next thing I said is, I'm going to do it on mass customization. Right? It was a chapter in his book, so I wanted to do a full book treatment on it.
Can you repeat the name of his book real quick?
Future Perfect.
Future Perfect.
Future Perfect. There's several books with that name out there, but Stanley M. Davis, I think is the formal name on it. I mean, I really recommend you still read it today. You know, that's how good it is.
I got a long car ride home. I'm putting this on Audible.
I was going to say you got to read it on the way home. Okay, and he has just as an aside, he has another chapter in his book that inspired another book of mine. So that's how good it is. So I basically did all my work, all I could to focus on this thing called mass customization. Eventually deciding long after the book was published that the way to think about it is efficiently serving customers uniquely, right? Giving everybody exactly what they want, but doing it at a price they're willing to pay. And so when it came time to write the thesis, I outlined a full book and then figured I could get 4 chapters done when I was at MIT and then the rest done when I got back at IBM. Right, and that's what happened. And I got Harvard Business School Press at the time, got a contract from them to publish the book. You know, the one thing they said was, we think it can be a great book. It's what we're looking for, but we have no idea how you're going to get done while working full time at IBM. To which I responded, I don't either, but I'll figure it out.
If you want it bad enough, you can figure it out.
Exactly. And it turned out within 6 months, I found a group within IBM, basically called Management Research under the IBM Consulting Group, that said they'd give me 40% of my time to finish the book so they could then teach and consult on it.
Nice.
So I joined the IBM Advanced Business Institute and started doing client executive education as well as consultant education, full day workshops and that sort of thing. And one of those with a bunch. For that, I actually left IBM then about 8 months after the book came out, simply because they gave my wife and I, she worked for IBM as well, both 6 months salary to leave, and they wanted me to become a full-time consultant, which I didn't really like the idea of, being gone for weeks at a time with young kids and everything.
That makes sense.
So I said, well, let's see if we can make it work out. And that was 30 years ago this past summer.
I was going to say, because the first edition of the book came out in like the late 90s.
Right.
Correct? 98 was it?
99 was the book, right.
Okay.
And Mass Customization came out in late 92. But 30 years later, my wife is still not sure it's going to work out, but so far so good. And so IBM then became my biggest client after I left. And in one of these workshops I did on mass customization, it was to the IBM Consulting Group. And one of the guys in the back of the room said, asked a question that I hadn't heard before. Because I often said that mass customizing a good automatically turns it into a service, right? If you goods, basic economic distinctions are goods are standardized, services are customized, done just for a particular person. Goods are inventoried after production, but services are delivered on demand when the customer says this is what they want. And part and parcel of mass customization is the intangible service of helping customers figure out what it is that they want. Right. So if you do all that, the easiest example in restaurants, you go to a Five Guys and you got a Coca-Cola Freestyle machine, right? And you see in there that you take your cup, right? They give you an empty cup. You take it up to the machine. You decide what particular drink you want. In my case, it's always Coke with lime. And then only then does it put those components together into your cup. So it's delivered on demand, right? It's not finished goods inventory they have. They're sitting in Coke bottles or whatnot, but it's work in process inventory waiting for you to decide what it is you want. In fact, what I generally do is I go up to about 80% full and I switch over to Coke Zero with lime, so I don't get quite as much sugar. So there's really an infinite number of possibilities because you could take your cup and you keep switching drinks all you want. Have those old suicide drinks I remember as a kid.
My mind's going to the kiosks of the world today, where now if you walk up to a kiosk, it recognizes who you are and your previous orders, so you can literally just like streamline that process and goes to you. Like, would that be the same example?
Yes,
or
yes,
okay.
Yes, because they're doing it on demand. They're doing it based on who you are and what you individually want.
So. Right. In terms of experience, this is just like convenience, or like where?
Well, that doesn't get you better experience. It just gets you good service.
Okay.
Right. And so what this one consultant in the back of the room, after I had said that, asked the question, well, you talked about service companies that mass customize. What does it turn a service into? And I shot back that mass customization automatically turns a service into an experience. and went, whoa, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. I got to write that down.
Yeah.
And I did. I wrote that down, and I spent time figuring it out and thinking about it, and realized that it was true that if you design a service that is so appropriate for this particular person, exactly the service that they need at this moment in time, then you can't help but make them go, wow, and turn it into a memorable event, turn it into an experience. So that means that experiences would be a distinct economic offering, right? That's the key point of the book that still people who read it don't always get that. It's a distinct economic offering as distinct from services, as services are from goods. And therefore, you'd have an economy based off of experiences, the experience economy.
Yeah. Can you paint the big picture? I think the book does a really great job. And again, I'm going to hold this up for the camera. I don't think I've done that yet. We have it. It's the experience economy, competing for customers' time, attention, and money. There's a cover if you haven't picked it up yet. You do a really great job in the beginning of the book, kind of just painting how we got here as the evolution of economy, going from commodity all the way to experience. I don't expect my listeners to be experts on how we transformed over time. Can you just run through that real quick to kind of get the big picture?
Sure. So it all began with the agrarian economy, right? That lasted for millennia, where you extract out commodities from the ground, animal, mineral, vegetable, and then sell them on the open marketplace, right? So if you're a restaurant chef and you go down to the wharf and you pick out the exact fish that you're going to cook that day, right? You're participating in still what the agrarian part of the economy.
You're purchasing, train of thought here. So you're purchasing, at that point, you're purchasing commodities. Like
right.
You're going,
Correct.
You're purchasing a commodity and you're making it a good.
Right. You then you actually make it into a good of a cooked fish, let's say. Then so that's the industrial economy. All of the cooking utensils, the tables and chairs people sit on, the decor, the building, everything. Those are physical goods, physical, tangible things that we touch and feel. Right. That was the basis of the industrial economy. Then we get into the service economy, and the service economy is where you use you deliver a set of intangible activities on behalf of each individual person. So you take that fish, they order it, only then do you cook it, right? Again, do it on demand for them individually and deliver it to their table. So restaurants are always classified as services, although there's always a gray area between these economic offerings. And one of them is like, you think about McDonald's, right? So McDonald's is a restaurant, but if they put the hamburgers in inventory and draw it off of that inventory, it's more like a good. One of the reasons why, if I go to McDonald's, I always order bacon on it, because then they always produce it from scratch. I mean, not truly from scratch. It's still the patty's been made before, but they're doing it. And it's going to be warmer, et cetera, and make it done more for me. So we shifted into an industrial economy in the early 1900s, is when it really finally overtook commodities as the predominant economic offering in the country. It's particularly when Henry Ford put it all, the assembly line and mass production all together. Then starting in the 1950s is when the service economy overtook manufacturing and became the predominant economic offering.
So what was happening in the 1950s to go from from goods to so was it goods? I always get it
from goods to services.
Goods to services. Thank you very much. Well, what was going on? What was the trigger that?
And people often say products. That may be the word you're wrestling with, but I always try. And I've done it myself. For product, we mean any type of economic offering. So I try and say goods is the physical thing, but so partly it's because we got so good at manufacturing, it took fewer and fewer people to be able to produce them. Because you look not just at GDP, but you look at employment. In the early 1900s, 40% of people still worked on farms, whereas today that's less than 2% of the people in the country. Where we have 4 or 5 times as many people in the country, and in the same way, manufacturing sort of topped out in the 1920s at 40%, and then slowly get down where today it's less than 8% of the people work in manufacturing jobs, and so it's services that really took over from that. And a lot of it, like in the 50s, is where you saw a lot of innovation in financial services, in credit cards and things like that. And logistics is another big part. And then you saw it's when people started going out to eat more and more as well. Retail blossomed, and that's a service, the merchandising that you do there. Even though you're selling physical goods, you didn't make them. You're retailing them.
So you had this abundance of goods circling the market, and now we're asking ourselves, how do we add value? Like, we can't recreate anything. We kind of hit the limit of the amount of goods we have. Maybe we can add value by offering our services to use these goods. So you have the good, but you still have to give your time to that good to mow your. You have you bought the lawnmower, but you still need 45 minutes to mow the lawn. Let me do that for you.
Exactly. And the question I always like to ask people is, and it used to be when the book first came out in the late 1990s, early 2000s, occasionally I'd still have to argue with somebody that this was going on, that they that they would say, no, experiences aren't really a real thing. They're not really an economic offering and so forth. And I just talk about how economies were changing. And so, for example, one of the questions I'd ask was, how many people here still change their own oil in their car, right? In the early 2000s, I'd get maybe one or two hands raised up. And today you get almost zero hands raised up. Why? It saves us time, right? As well as the cleaning up, as well, the monkeying around with it. We value it more highly, the time that it would take to do that, and more highly than the dollars in our pocket to pay somebody else to do it. And the other question I love to ask is, how many people here have killed chickens for dinner? And one, it'd almost always be a few more than still change their own oil in the car. And two, the people who had never killed a chicken for dinner, cannot imagine killing a chicken for dinner, would look like the people who had killed chickens for dinner were from Mars, right? And I said, if you believe that we wouldn't advance in economies, we'd still all be killing chickens for dinner, right? We don't do that. We let other people do that, and we spend our time in ways that we value more highly.
So we shift from, doing it ourselves to outsourcing. And I think you alluded in the book too, that the Japanese culture was a little bit ahead of us when it came to that, like, because they had an abundance of labor, right? But we had an abundance of goods. So there was kind of a shift in culture. I digress. But when did like the experience economy really start to replace the service economy?
Well, so one thing to understand is that experiences have always been around, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not a new economic offering, just newly identified. And if you look at all the government statistics, they recognize experiences, but they lump them into services. I mean, they say all admission fee things, sporting events, concerts, plays, movies, and that. They have categories for them, but they say, hey, these are just services. And it's funny how now you read all these articles about how services in the last year are so much growing faster than experiences. As we came out of the pandemic, we shifted to goods because we couldn't have experiences. And now they talk about how we're now shifting our spending to services, but then they always say services like going out to dinner, like going to concerts, like going to Taylor Swift has an impact on GDP this year because of her concert.
That's wild.
So you have that shift that is going on, and it's always been there. But there's one point where you can see a demarcation point, and see if you can guess what happened on this date. And July 13th, 1955. Could be July 17th. I got to think a little bit.
1955. I know post-World War. I don't know what happened. Was that JFK?
No, it was Disneyland opened in California.
Oh.
Right? And here was something that was so distinct. It got so much remarking on, right? So it was a remarkable event that became an icon for experiences. So that was sort of the point where you could see that experiences were going on. You could recognize, hey, this is different. But it really took until, probably after the 2008, 2009 economic crisis for experiences to really come to the fore and become the predominant economic offering over services. And now because of the pandemic, it's gone up even further. That, the one thing we couldn't do during the pandemic was have experiences. We couldn't. Any place people wanted to gather together was a place nobody wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so you had this tremendous pent up demand. And then as soon as some experience opened up, it would be filled to capacity. Disneyland, 25%. Okay, 25% were there, and they had to turn people away. Whatever it was, with the exception of movies, because they stopped putting good movies out there. Mm-hmm. So they're the only ones that lag behind.
So what was going on in 2008? Was it just a matter of the fact that the market was so saturated with services that it wasn't enough just to be a service? You had to offer something special?
Yeah, well, we had this huge recession which also got people thinking about where do they want to spend their money, right? Is that we're recognizing that we got to be careful in how we spend our money because we may be out of a job or could see that maybe that might happen, and the interest rates have gone way up and so forth. And it really got people thinking about the fact that experiences have more value to them than things, that experiences are more meaningful to them than things. There was this comic in the New Yorker magazine. It's famous for its little cartoon strips there, single panel ones. And there was one that had these people at a bar, and they were saying to each other, we were into things, and now we're into experiences.
So was it just a shift in culture where we're just starting to value different things?
Yeah, it is, and it's good, Eric, that you use the word shift, right? Because everything is always a shift. People always say, "Oh, that's dead," and this is no, nothing ever dies, right? It's always going to stick around. Almost, there's still buggy whips that are sold, for goodness sakes, and but there is this shift that happens and people recognize in this case that it is a shift of desiring more experiences than services and than goods.
I mean, is it tied with just? I mean, I feel like there's a increased level of just awareness today, or just, I don't know, mindfulness of like, will things make you happy? Like there's that instant like hit of dopamine you get when you buy a new car, or like you feel look good, but that feeling doesn't last long.
Right.
Whereas an experience, if it's truly an amazing experience, like you can reflect back at that experience and it can still bring amazing feelings.
Yes, it's the memories.
Okay.
Right. It's the memories that you keep that bring that feeling back again and again and again. And particularly if you have memorabilia for that, every time you see a ticket to Disney World, or a PhotoPass book that you purchased, or a concert ticket, whatever it might be, you have or Mickey Mouse hat and watch, whatever. You remember the experience, it recalls it, it brings it to mind, it helps cement those memories. And so that you get that, that dopamine hit every time you remember, not just when you experience it live.
Well, you pointed out it was 2007, 2008 when the shift from service to experience started, really started to take over. I'm curious what the correlation between that and social media is, with now people wanting to be seen for the experiences they have. That, like, look at what I'm doing.
Yep.
Look how cool I am. Like that psychographic of like, look how interesting my life is. Do you think?
Yeah. No, I think that's very insightful that we, as it became a thing to post our experiences, or to post us inside of experiences, that helped accelerate that shift, because then we wanted to have more experiences. There are some places that exist in my mind solely because of social media, like the Museum of Ice Cream and other Instagrammable places, as they call it, right? There's not enough of an experience going on, but you've got great backdrops for pictures. And so that's enough to get people to pay $30, $35 for an hour and a half, and be able to enjoy it, and particularly in posting it on social media. So in any other experience, that's a big thing. I can still remember I used to tell clients, the last thing you want is somebody pulling out their phone in your experience, because it means they're dropping out of the experience. But now recognize, no, they're pulling out their phone so they can take a picture of it, which helps with their memories and so forth. I still do think it actually gets in the way of the actual experiencing, that you sacrifice the actual experiencing for maybe greater memories of the experience. And so I don't tend to do that, but it's something that people love to do.
Well, I think part of the experience is the knowing of other, like, it's just the fact that other people know that you're here doing it. It's more about how I feel like the psychographics of like, what do people think of me when they know that I'm experiencing this experience?
Yeah.
Which is an experience in itself.
Right.
Which I think is an issue, but I digress. So one thing I want to start diving into is this idea of like, how does this manifest? How does the experience economy manifest? And I think when people think of the experience economy, they think of things like the Rainforest Cafe. And I know you must know that gentleman. Yep. He's based here in Minneapolis.
His name's Steve Schussler.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes. We've met a number of times.
I have his book. I'm trying to connect with him when I'm down in Florida, because I know he has a lot of projects down there. I'd love to get him on the show. But I
can make an introduction.
I've met him. Yeah, okay. We're in touch. It's just a matter of lining up while we're both in Florida. So your mind goes to the experience economy, like the Rainforest Cafe is like, I think, what a lot of people think of. And I would think that a lot of people today would argue that the day of the theme restaurant is almost come and gone. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think the theme restaurant as most often put together is definitely not a lasting concept. And it's because it's what I call theme restaurant disease, that most theme restaurants think if you have this great environment that you have a great experience, and therefore you can get away with lousy food and poor service, right? Which is not the case. You've got to bring it all together. Experiences are built on top of services, so you need great service. Services are built on top of goods, so you need good food, right? You need to put it all together. And I would also submit that, as we say in chapter 3 of the book, all experiences are themed, right? You may not be themed intentionally, but they're all themed. They all have a underlying concept, an organizing principle, a dominant idea that you get out of it. Even a white tablecloth, restaurant is a theme unto itself. So you always have that theme, and it's better if you do it intentionally, like theme restaurants do. But theme restaurants also tend to be in your face and over the top.
Right. So the day of the theme leading the experience is over.
Right.
It can't carry the ship anymore. It can't carry everything.
Right. Again, not completely over, but is diminishing.
Right.
And so there's room for other experiences that have more subtle themes and are designed well, and in particular don't sacrifice the food and the service.
Yeah. I think there was 4 realms of experience, right? And those are?
Entertainment, educational, escapist, and aesthetic.
So when we're thinking of these different experiences, we want to think within those realms. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, you want what you want to use the realms for is to help you design any experience, because the most robust experiences, the best experiences, are those that hit the sweet spot in the middle, that have aspects of all 4 realms. So yeah, there may be times where you want to purely design for one realm. And cafes, for example, have their center of gravity, if you will, in the aesthetic experience. And it's aesthetic with an E, not an AE. AE is a philosophical study of beauty. Aesthetic with an E is about the built environment that you create, that people want to come in, hang out, and just be. So that's, with cafes, that can be very strong. You don't necessarily want to blare music at them for entertainment value, or have TVs going on like in a sports bar. Or you may want to teach them some aspects of coffee and how it's grown and made and that sort of thing. And maybe you want to transport them to a different reality that slows them down with escapists. But your center of gravity is going to remain in that aesthetic level experience. But in general, if there are elements where we can bring in all 4 realms of experience, we're going to have a better experience, and particularly a more robust experience.
Got it. So I think the other thing that I want to bring to the conversation, but actually before we dive into that, we're going to take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll be right back. We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that right now, Restaurant Systems Pro is offering a no strings attached 60-day trial that will help you improve your systems, increase your profit, and find better work-life balance. All you have to do is click the link below. We're back. So one of the things I really want to dive into and make sure we unpackage today is helping my listeners understand where their experiences are, where we are providing experiences that we're not even aware of, how to identify those experiences, those points of experience, but then also how do we pay or charge for this? So does that trigger you into a series of thoughts?
To figure out where you're at is again, one of the key distinctions between services and experiences is time well saved. Right? I talked about how change your own oil in the car, it saves you time. That's what you're looking for with services. Do something so that I don't have to do it. And so services are time well saved. What experiences are is time well spent. That people actually value the time that they spend in your place. You can, in a restaurant, you can provide either one, right? So if you have mobile ordering and pickup, right, you're providing time well saved. But if people come in and sit down and have a great meal and enjoy the time that they're spending eating and socializing and so forth, then you provide a time well spent. And then there are aspects of each in any one experience generally. So like we mentioned going to Disneyland before. You go to Disneyland, it's very much time well spent, but you don't want to spend a lot of time getting into Disneyland, right? There used to be long lines at the gate to get in, and that's time wasted.
Right.
Right. And so the worst thing to do is waste people's time. And then with the Magic Band, they figured out how to be able to get you in basically immediately. There's no waiting time whatsoever to get into Disney.
That's a recent thing, right?
Yeah, the last 10 years or so.
Well, I think they just launched an app too. Like there's now you don't wait in lines at all. It's all queued. Like you get like your notification that the ride's ready for you.
You're right. Virtual queues, and that's where things should go.
Yeah.
So in restaurants too, right? If you have to wait for your table, that's often wasted time.
Right.
Right. But there are some places where that can be, you use the term, I think, experience moment. So I don't know if you're familiar with Heidi Lo restaurants out of China. There's a few in the U.S., but they often have long lines. In fact, when I was last in China, we talked about going to one. I said, well, let's go to the Heidi Lo. And they said, well, it's a 45-minute wait, whereas this place is open. We said, okay, we'll go to the open place. But if it had been a half-hour wait, I said, let's do it. But anyway, because what they do is that the wait staff will come out and basically entertain you while you are waiting. They'll give you games to play. They'll do little contests. They'll tell jokes. They'll just talk with you and so forth, so that you are until a table become ready.
Right.
So they turn that waiting time, that wasted time, into time well spent.
I mean, two things come to mind when we talk about that. Like, there's the waiting apps that are out there where I think if you are a wait. If you're a restaurant that doesn't do reservations and you run based off like a line, right? If you're not leveraging an app to let people wait at home virtually, like I don't know why you wouldn't add that value, because to your point, it's time well saved. And leading into time well spent, you're instantly adding value to your consumer.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't you offer that?
Exactly.
There's another feature out there, or another app business called Line Leap, where now you're giving people the option to bypass the line at an additional value, like you're basically
by paying more money.
Exactly. Like, why wouldn't you offer that opportunity? That goes straight to the house. You what goes through your mind as I share these types of things?
Well, yeah, the only thing on the last thing is you've got to worry about people getting ticked off because they're being superseded in line.
They have the same option.
They have, but nonetheless, it's like the old pay the maitre d' $20 and he'll seat you.
Right.
So it sort of brings that back. But there can be people who will view that as unfair, let's say.
Elitist or
elitist and so forth. I think if done well, it's obviously a valuable thing to do. Economically, it's exactly the right thing to do, because what you always want to do is you want to get people to pay the most amount of money they're willing to pay for an experience. Yeah. And so you get to go ahead and because you're willing to pay more for it, and that's a better use of economic resources overall. It makes the country better at a macro level.
I see it working better in like ticketed events where there's a bunch of people coming for a show, right? And there's a long line on a Friday night, and why not give here's another layer of service that we're willing to provide if you have the money to pay for it, right? Why shouldn't you open yourself up to that opportunity? Have you heard of the company Tock? T-O-C-K.
Yes.
What goes through your mind there?
Well, so basically what Tock is doing is enabling restaurants to charge admission for the experience. Mm-hmm. And that's what you need to do. So to digress a little bit, it's really key to understanding that when you're looking at distinct economic offerings, that everyone has a different way of charging for it. So one of the ways you can tell what makes them which offering, because as a company, you are what you charge for. So if you charge for undifferentiated stuff, you're in the commodities business. If you charge for tangible things, you're in the goods business. If you charge for the activities your people perform, you're in the services business. But economically, you're in the experience business if and only if you charge for time. Right, the time your customers spend with you, because that's what they value, is the time. Right, you wouldn't imagine going to a theme park or a sporting event or a concert or a play or a movie without paying an admission fee, because you know it's an experience. And one of the most controversial things we probably said in the original edition of the Experience Economy was that in the future, retailers and restaurants and manufacturers and others would charge admission for experiences. And people thought we were crazy, but now you see that. And one of the first was Next in Chicago, Grant Anschutz's restaurant, simply because of demand. The demand was so high. And if they had a cancellation, right, and you lost that money, right, it's what's the word?
It's lost revenue.
It's lost revenue immediately. You can't replenish it again. And so they put in a system which eventually became Talk, with his business partner, funding it and doing it, that you would have to get online and reserve a particular time and pay in advance. Right. And now you've got the use of that money. One of the big things it does for the days or months before you get that reservation, that you didn't, in a time of low interest rates, it doesn't matter that much. In a time of high interest rates, that matters a lot to the bottom line. And also people aren't going to cancel, or if they do cancel, you've got a 48-hour notice, or you're going to pay anyway.
If they do cancel, great. Now you can replace that reservation with somebody else.
Right. Exactly. So they're never out of inventory basically because of that. And it completely changes the dynamics, right? You're paying an admission fee. It sends a signal that this is a place worth experiencing.
Well, I think the other big variable there is that a Friday night experience at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. isn't the same value on a Tuesday night, where that seat is in high demand, right? So it's more valuable. Charge for it. And I think that's another thing that Talk brought to the table, is this sliding scale of like, hey, this is dynamic.
Right.
The value of our seat is dynamic throughout the week, and our prices should reflect that dynamic shift that's happening, the increase in demand during peak time versus not peak time.
Right. I mean, dynamic pricing, again, is obviously the way to go. It maximizes the revenue for the effort. And there are things that can happen. You can also, if you notice that for whatever reason, this particular evening is less than it normally is. Maybe it's because the NBA had its in-season cup championship, and your team's playing, whatever it might be, and so therefore you can actually lower the price as you get closer to it, as you see the demand isn't there. I mean, the airlines have done that for years. They call it yield management. And it's a matter of just finding the right price that people are willing to pay for, which maximizes revenue, which means you get to provide the experience that you want, which means people have better experiences.
Right. I use Hotel Tonight. I don't know if you ever heard that app, but basically
it's always for this evening, right?
Yeah, this evening. Right. You can get great rates because it's better than being empty, you know? But I want to go back to this idea. You said you are what you charge. Help us understand you spelled that out really well. But in terms of on a more micro level, we are what we charge within our four walls. Yep. What are the things we can do to elevate an experience to ask for more in return from the consumer?
Well, the thing is, first of all, to state what business you're in and recognize we are in the experience business. Mm-hmm. Yes, we provide goods and services, but we do that to create a great experiences.
I think restaurant owners are really good at recognizing. You hear it all the time. We're not in the business of feeding people. We are creating experiences.
Right.
We're just not good at charging for it.
Right. Right. And that's where you have to get to that point to be able to do it. And there are a number of restaurants today that have shown the way to be able to do it. And again, Talk is a great software that allows you to do it as well. It helps if basically you're sold out. That's the best time to be able to do that, is to put in the admission fee. And there are other ways of doing admission fees as well. I just got an engagement next month in Porto, Portugal. And so one of the places I'm going to go to, whenever I go to places, try and experience things. But there is a bookstore. I'm not very good at pronouncing Portuguese, but it's like Leo Livera. And they charge admission to get into the bookstore. And the reason being is it's like the most beautiful bookstore in the world. This thing is amazing. They have a staircase in there that supposedly inspired J.K. Rowling, who actually wrote the first Harry Potter in Porto, for the Hogwarts staircase. And the problem is people were coming into their place and filling it up and not buying anything. So they just wanted to see it and take pictures in it. So they instituted a little booth across the street that you have to buy a ticket first to get in. And when I first heard about it, 10, 12, 15 years ago, it was €3 to get in. And then somebody told me, oh yeah, I was there. It was €5. And somebody told me, oh, it was €8. My daughter went to it. Oh, it's €10. It just keeps going up.
Yeah.
Now, what they also interestingly do is they give you the money back if you actually buy something.
Oh, cool.
Right. So they actually sell more. So in the end, you don't feel like it's a big barrier because I'll probably buy something anyway. And people do. So it's one of the ways to be able to do it. Others, you can also do it for times. Starbucks I use as an exemplar of the experience economy.
So that last example, real quick,
Yep.
if that wasn't for time, that was for fill in the blank.
Well, they're charging for the time to get in. It's an admission fee, an entrance fee to the bookstore.
Yeah.
So it's about how much time you're $3, $5, up to $10 for the time you're spending in there.
Got it.
Right, but they're giving you the opportunity to buy things and take that admission fee off.
Right, and you were leading into the next example.
Yes, Starbucks is. I always use it as an exemplar of the experience economy because they take a commodity, coffee beans, which are worth 2 or 3 cents per cup, and turn it into an experience of a coffee drinking experience in a physical place for. I used to say $2, $3, $4, and I said $3, $4, $5. Now it's $4, $5, $6, sometimes $7 or more. I know it's ridiculous about how much has gone up, but they don't charge admission, right? So they do what most companies do with any of these economic shifts: is they give away the next value in order to better sell what they have today.
They give away the next value to better sell what they have today.
So they give away the experience. They allow you to be in the experience, to in the place, and they're still charging for the service of making you a cup of coffee, a personal cup of coffee just for you. And what people are valuing is the time that they spend in the place, and they're commoditizing themselves with their doing their car drive-throughs, with their mobile pickup and all done in the same place. They're commoditizing themselves. And so one of the ways they should do it, in my mind, is they should charge 25 cents less if it's mobile or drive-through. And it could be 50 cents. And again, that's something you can play with to figure out what the right number is. And then if you are in the restaurant.
Because you'll make up for it on throughput. And you're not paying for the experience of being in the restaurant.
Right. Because that's the real reason, because you're not paying for it, and your costs are lower, therefore. Right. But the real reason is to send a signal that this is an experience, and you pay for the experience that you're having. Yeah. And if it moved more people to mobile, that probably improves their profits, right, and provides a better experience for those people that stay.
Got it. You list the different types of ways to charge people, whether it's membership or a pre-sale. Can you get into those real quick?
Yeah. It's not a model I have totally internalized, but it's a matter of whether you are selling based off of each entry, or you're selling more of a one-time fee. So you have initiation fees. Like most clubs that you join have an initiation fee plus a monthly membership fee, and so you can do both of those. You can charge for recurring occurrences, like an access fee to a streaming, like you're streaming Netflix, right? You want to stream Netflix, and so every month you're paying for that, versus doing it on just whenever I enter it, I have to pay again and again and again for each time, like you would like on DirecTV or others, where I'm just going to buy this one movie and here's an extra fee to buy that movie.
Can you think of examples where it makes sense to use those different charging models?
Well, it really depends on the particular business. If you're looking for more of a lasting relationship, then you want an upfront fee of some sort, right? A membership fee, initiation fee, and so forth. You'd like to get that recurring revenue where they're paying every month for things, and then others, it's just like every time you want to think of slot machines. I call that a per event or a per play fee, right? You're putting your money. Now it's not so much actual coins, but a card, right? But you're putting your money for every turn of the crank that you have there, and then you get those dopamine hits every time you turn that crank. And so it makes sense to be able to do it that way, versus here it's $100 for an hour of playing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What comes to my mind when I think of membership fees is this idea of creating you have your standard offering, the traditional idea of going to a restaurant, making a reservation, or waiting in line. But what about a separate experience that you create that's elevated from the normal experience, maybe in a back room, where like once a month we there's a pie of the month where like it's a special pie that only members can get, and it's an extra, I don't know, $50 a month where you can come and you can make the pizza with us. We teach you how to make, or like whatever, like what's going through your mind as I'm sharing this?
Right. Those are all good ideas, right? One is to get into classes. Absolutely. Show people how to do it. The other, so those are very insightful answers. Doing classes and things is a wonderful thing. But also I love what you said about different times and places that you might be able to do things. So one of the areas to target is when you have the least demand, right? So that you have an opportunity, right? So Starbucks, for example, later at night, they could turn it into a music cafe, right? And you got an admission fee to listen to a music act, and you come in. Look for those areas where you have less demand. Like it's why there's so many discounts on Tuesday night, right? Because people go to restaurants less on Tuesday night. So turn that into an admission fee night. Open mic night into
trivia,
music acts, trivia, right? Great thing.
Board game night or whatever.
Yeah, my son-in-law, right? So he's works for a professional software company, but on Thursday nights he does the trivia for this winery not too far from here, and it brings in a lot of extra revenue for them. And so that's a great way of being able to do it.
Yeah, the guest down in Austin, Texas, Nickel City. His name is Travis Tober, I think is his name. He's like, I'm not in the business of bars. I'm in the events business.
Right.
Like we are constantly throwing events. I think it's, you become an expert in just figuring out what people want to do and hosting amazing events that drive traffic to your business, because he realizes that it's all about the experience. In terms of like membership too, the other things that I've seen in my time is getting out of the standard and diversifying your portfolio to not just have the four walls experience, but hey, for like, again, like a flat monthly fee, we'll send you the ingredients so you can make this at home. Like meal kits is something that's really big now. And there's tools and services out there today where you don't have to build all the logistics on the back end. You can partner with people that handle the logistics for you, and they come and they pick up everything for you. I think it's weird. It's like, I don't know if that would be, it's like I think the service economy is still almost like transforming, and like it's like, I feel like the service and the experience kind of go hand in hand, because now
absolutely. They do go hand in hand, because again, experiences are built on top of services. It's also, again, you've got that gray area, so you can shift from services to experiences without a lot of change.
Yeah.
Right. One is basically just changing your mindset. Right. It says we're in the experience business, and then you'll be able to create that great experience just from that mindset change.
Right. So just over this past week, being in Minneapolis, because I was listening to your book while I was driving across the country, there's amazing examples of restaurateurs using experience. I mentioned the classes. We have Peter Campbell, who is doing his pizza classes, where he gives you the history of why he started the restaurant. He teaches you how to make his pizzas. He tells you why his pizzas are unique, the things that he does that separates his pizzas from other pizzas. Then after you've made your pizza, and while you're eating your pizza, you're sitting down and doing a Q&A with the chef about why, and he's just taking time to get to know you. He's asking questions like, where are you coming in? So it's like all these little things. It's educational. It's experiential, where you're developing a relationship, a one-on-one type of relationship with the chef, where he's just being present with you. Like, these are just things I think almost everybody can do. Yeah. What's going through your mind as I'm sharing?
You remind me of one thing. My father used to love to say, and it actually was true. He would say, I can become a regular in a restaurant in one visit. It's like, they're like, name that too, right? And he could. It was amazing, because he loved being a regular. He loved people knowing his name, that sort of thing. And so he would tell the waitstaff his name. He would ask their name. He would use their name. He would find a reason to use his own name, like talking to us as he's going through there. He'd tell them about how he liked his drinks and his food and everything. And he really could. And he just made, so he was working to create an experience for the restaurant.
Yeah.
by which they would remember him, right? It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
We have an experience economy expert certification course we do generally once a year. And one of the exercises we do is we go out to retail and try and make their day, right? Retailers and the restaurants we go to, they should be making your day. They should be focused on the experience. But since they're generally not, you are going to do it for them, right? Here's your goal: is that whoever you interact with, you want them to go home that day and say to their family that you won't believe what happened today, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And now how do you make that happen? And that's basically what acting is all about.
Yeah. And in terms of acting, I think of Tommy Begnaud and Tim Niver. So in Tommy Begnaud, the chef owner of Mr. Paul's Supper Club. I don't know if you've had the pleasure. You must go, my friend.
Well, yeah.
It's
Is that here?
It's only a 30-minute drive to Minneapolis. Yeah. But that restaurant, it's in a sense, it's a theme restaurant. It's themed after New Orleans, and they transport their guests. It's not over the top like Rainforest Cafe theme, but you hear brass music playing in the back. Like it's a very they're trying to bring you into New Orleans with the decor, the music, the food, the drink, but it's also very unique to him and his story, where that's where his grandfather, that's where his family's from. You know?
So it's authentic as well to him.
You're personalizing it, but they transport you, and they try to. You walk into that place, you feel like you're in New Orleans, you know, and they have fun. They're putting on a show, which brings me to the next thing that I would like to discuss with you. Actually, this is going to be a teaser because I don't know if we've tied up the idea of like, how do we know what to charge? And then I want to get into this idea of being on stage.
All right.
So do we fully unpackage? Like, how do you know your value?
You, you don't always know your value until you get up to the point where people start saying no. All right. And sometimes you don't want to get to that point. Right. But if nobody ever says no to your prices, then you're not charging enough.
Okay. So don't be afraid. So I think the standard operating procedure right now for charging, like developing your price, is you look at what the person down the street is charging, and you charge a little less. You know?
Right. No, that's charge a little more. What are you kidding me?
Well, I think what happened over the past 50 years is exactly that, which is why people expect to get a tremendous amount of value for their dining experience, because we just competed against each other for the longest time, where we just offered a little less than the next guy, and there's just a little less margin for us. But I think what I want to help people understand is figure out what your cost of goods are, figure out your prime cost, your labor, everything that goes into making that product and that experience, and then add 10% to whatever you have to do to get your, at least 10%. But I don't think I'm outrageous by saying we should be making 15 to 20% on our margins,
or more. Right. I mean, particularly if you're, the sort of the cost plus model is definitely a manufacturing service delivery sort of thing. When you get into experiences, it's really about the value that people get out of your experience, and that can be far more than the cost. Right, when you're talking experiences. And generally you look at every experience, and it's not based on the cost. It's based on what the market will bear, what people are willing to pay. You look at the Taylor Swift tour and how much people are willing to pay for that. And so that's what you need to find. And there's a dance between the level of experience you provide and how much you can charge for it, right? Again, you don't want to get above the experience that you're providing, right? Because then you'll either have bad word of mouth or people stop going. And so you're always then a little under that ideally, but it is again about time well spent. So one of the ways to measure yourself is, we talk in the book, we introduce a new concept in the 2020 re-release of the book called the money value of time, right? Or MVT. And MVT is about measuring the expenditures per minute. And now you can do that across industries. You can do it with retailers versus restaurants versus theme parks versus sporting events, whatever you want. It's what's the dollar per minute that they're paying. If you go to a movie, you're paying, let's say, an average of $12 for the movie for about 2 hours, right? That works out to 10 cents per minute, right? That's a good experience. You can get 10 cents per minute. Starbucks, you go there, you buy a $5 cup of coffee, and you spend a half hour or an hour there, you're spending 5 to 10 cents per minute, right? So it's sort of that same order of magnitude. You go to a Disney World, you're spending around 30 cents per minute. You go to an escape room, partly because it's more condensed amount of time, more intense than a Disney World is. You're paying 40, 50, 60 cents per minute, right? And the sky's the limit. I mean, literally, you look at people are paying thousands of dollars a minute to go into space. So the sky's the limit. So figure out what is the average time that people are spending with you. And it might be good to know who are the people that leave early and why, who are the people that are spending a lot more time and why, what your standard deviation is, so to speak. And divide that expenditure, the total meal ticket for the amount of time that they're spending you, and then see where you are in that, and say, well, can I create an experience that's as good as an escape room? And your New Orleans restaurant, Mr. Paul, was it?
Yeah, Mr. Paul's Supper Club.
Mr. Paul's Supper Club could very well be an example of that. Certainly, nightclubs are getting that. Comedy clubs are getting that, which often have a meal. We got the Chanhassen Dinner Theater, which is also a restaurant with a play going on around you, that's getting at that sort of level. And when you get to that level, when you know you're getting above at least 10 cents per minute, then you should be able to start thinking about how you charge for it. And that transition was one of the most difficult things. How do you go from not charging for the experience to charging for the experience? And so the way, again, that Tock does it, where basically you just have a prefixed meal, right? Yeah. It's one price is the easiest way to do that, because then you see, okay, now you're just paying in advance.
Yeah, and you know in advance how many people are going to show up. You can buy exactly what you need. You're not wasting.
Right. It improves the economics tremendously, so you'll make even more profit off of that than you do today.
Yeah, I think now is a great time to take our next break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about thinking about. So you broke down how to think about this, but I think the next evolution of the conversation is how do we start treating our restaurants like a stage, and how do we start finding points that increase the value of the experience? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that right now Restaurant Systems Pro is offering a no strings attached 60-day trial that will help you improve your systems, increase your profit, and find better work-life balance. All you have to do is click the link below. All right, we're back, and there are two more things I really want to tap on. We kind of express the significance of recognizing yourself as an experience-based business model. I want to touch on the different points of experience we can add to our businesses, thinking of our business as shows and a theater, and the touch points and how we can add value to the experience. But then I also want to wrap up on talking about this idea of the transformation economy, which is kind of like the evolution of the experience economy. But back to this idea. So you just mapped out how to value, what is it, price per minute or something?
Expenditures per minute. Yep.
Yeah, expenditures per minute. How can we improve the experiences for our guests? Like, take me down this path of we're all in a show business.
Right.
Tap into that.
Right. So, yeah. So, I mean, we talked about customization as a key route up this progression of economic value as I talk about it, to turn goods into services and services into experiences. We talked about cohesive experiences with theming and robust experiences with hit the sweet spot. The next key thing is understand about how do you stage dramatic experiences. So you mentioned that the subtitle to the 2020 re-release of the book was Competing for Customer Time, Attention, and Money. The original subtitle for the book, when it first came out in 1999, was Work is Theater and Every Business is Stage. And so it is important to understand that when you stage experiences, work is theater. And I don't mean that as a metaphor. It's not work as theater. I literally mean that when you are in front of customers, the guests in your restaurant or whatever experience you have, you are on stage and your workers are on stage. And you need to engage them, engage the audience in your experience through the acting that you do.
Yeah.
And you did make a brief mention early on, I remember, about some people thinking that acting is phony.
Right.
And my wife is that way. She thinks all actors are phonies.
I think that's the case for a lot of people, because I think a big word, a trigger word, is authenticity.
Yeah.
And are we being authentic if we're putting on a show?
Yes. So it depends is the answer. Yeah. So the follow-up book to that original edition was we wrote a book on authenticity. Authenticity, what consumers really want. It was amazing that a couple of weeks ago, Merriam-Webster announced authentic as its word of the year, right? One of the most searched words of the year, which gets back to, what we've talked about in that book as well. And so the thing is that acting absolutely can be fake. It can be phony, but not necessarily. And one of the examples I love in the greater food business, not restaurants, but is Pike Place Fish Market in Seattle.
Yes.
Right. You've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so if anybody hasn't been there, you don't know this, but they're famous for throwing the fish, right? It's like a normal fishmonger stall in Pike Place Market, in Seattle. And when you order something, they shout out the order like salmon flying away to Minnesota, and then all the workers shout it back, salmon flying away to Minnesota, and then they throw that salmon up across 15, 20 feet where somebody catches it and wraps it up. And they often do put customers behind there to catch it as well, as you mentioned with the other experience. And it's a signature moment that they have, this wow moment that people know about, anticipate, go there, want to see, want to experience, and then of course want to talk about it afterwards. And the thing to understand is that these people go home smelling like fish. They are not paid actors. They are not fake or phony. They're having a great time. They want you to have a great time. My friend John Christensen here in the Minneapolis area created the Immortal Fish video to be able to, where he went and filmed them and drew out the principles that they have. And it's about play and having fun while you're doing it. It's about make their day, focusing on them and what they're doing. And the final principle they have is choose your attitude. And that's what acting fundamentally is. Acting is choosing what parts of yourself to reveal to those in front of yourself. And so it's not fake or phony. Again, it can be if you're revealing things that you really are not, right? If you're pretending, that's fake. But if you're revealing different parts of yourself, I mean, we all know we act differently in front of our parents than we do our kids, in front of our friends versus strangers, in front of colleagues versus bosses, and so forth. It's not that we're necessarily fake or phony in any one of those, but just revealing different parts of ourselves. And that's what acting is choosing, being intentional about everything that you do.
Yeah, and when I hear what's going through my mind as I listen to you talk is this idea of what's behind the restaurant. So what are you? I mean, there's a level of this authenticity, like you're sharing the story of Pike's Place. It sounds like the people there almost have a level of pride of the work that they do, and you went through the kind of the values and like this. I think that if you give people a worthy cause, if you give your employees a worthy cause, a mission to execute, to deliver happiness, whatever it is, and you can sell them, you can get them to drink the Kool-Aid, and then there is a level of showmanship that goes into promoting that worthy cause. But ultimately, I think it's just this choice that you get to change people's life. Like what is behind the thing that you do that motivates people to show up a certain way? I think so. What's going through my mind is culture. Is like tying a strong culture into and putting that in the background of whatever it is you do to give people purpose to show up a certain way.
And you just then use the word I would use as well, as it's about purpose. It's about purpose. So one of the other fundamental distinctions besides time between services and experiences is services are about the what, right? The functional things that you do. Experiences are about the how. It's how you do what you do. Right. So how do you transfer fish to a colleague so they can wrap it up? Right. Well, normally you walk it over. No, here we're going to throw it. Right. It's how you do what you do. And then you also then need to think about the why. Right. And that's where purpose comes in. Meaningful purpose is just a higher level of a framework I have that relates acting and theming and purpose together. So it's all about intention. Right, it's all about intention. So your acting intention is it's like perform blank in order to blank. Right, what's that in order to? Perform transferring fish in order to entertain. Right, then okay, we're going to throw the fish. For example, it's what your intention is. That's the how you do what you do. Then there's the theme of the experience. Right, the theme of the experience is your intention about the experience overall. Right, that theme brings everything together, makes it cohesive, allows you to decide what's in the experience and what's out of the experience. And then you have what's called in strategy strategic intention, right? This is sort of the change you want to be in the world in the next 3, 5, 10 years. And then above that, everything flows from the meaningful purpose, right? This is the highest level intention that you have. This is who you are at your core. This is your raison d'etre, the reason why you exist in business besides making a buck.
Yeah.
And it's important to have that meaningful purpose that aligns everybody together and allows them to not have to be told, second by second, moment by moment, this is what to do. But no, we're doing things to fulfill our purpose.
Yeah. I made a note going through the last night when I was just going through making some notes. I asked, does strategic intent equal conscious capitalism?
It can be if the strategic intent is conscious about capitalism. It doesn't have to be, but it's sort of a good place where that conscious capitalism operates at.
Yeah,
yes,
and I think this is kind of leading into like this idea of transformation and like the transformation economy. But before we get into that, I do want to pull one example, this idea of being on stage. I think of Tim Niver. Maybe you've heard of Tim Niver. He's a pretty well-known St. Paul's restaurateur.
I'm going to have
Mucci's
to get you to make a list of all the restaurants I should be experiencing here in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, but his backstory is he's from Buffalo, moved out to Minneapolis, and then he ended up moving out to. He was in New York where he learned like this level of showmanship from like having to experience New York guests eating out at like fancy steakhouses. He learned that he had to match the level of energy of these guests, because in New York everyone kind of has an ego. They're trying to impress the people that are coming in. Like, I'm a big deal here. They know me. We're gonna get a good seat. And he had to learn this dance with the guest to respect the line of like, your experience is no greater than any other guest that comes in here. So he kind of learned how to be rude in a very hospitable way, where it's like, I'm going to respect you, but I'm also going to draw this line. And then he also combined that with his experience in Las Vegas, where he helped open the Bellagio, So he brought all these experiences of kind of being raw and gritty. And like, he knows this idea of like, the showmanship associated with Las Vegas. He brought that to Minneapolis and opened the Town Talk Diner. I don't know if you remember the name of that restaurant, but the people that worked for him and what they were doing there, they literally transported people out of the Midwest into like this raw, gritty, like showmanship. They almost confused the guests, because they're like, they would walk in, everyone would just start cheering and clapping, like, "Hey, you made it!" And like, people were like, "What's going on here?" But it was like, what goes through your mind as I'm sharing this type of stuff right here in terms of showmanship?
Right. Well, he does understand that he's on stage and needs to act in a particular way, and he's doing it in a way that to get guests to not get ticked off when they don't get exactly what they want. Right. Which is an important factor to do. It's often done in street theater, right? One of the forms of theater is street theater, and you've got to be able to handle hecklers. Right? Those are the people that are want something different and so forth. And so it's a great skill to have, to be able to learn how to do that well, and massaging their egos at the same time, not giving them exactly what they might want.
In that interview, he also, like we talked about, from the other people that I interviewed that worked with him, Tim Niver would train his staff to make love to the guests. And when he explained what that means, it means that if you've made love to different people, you know that no two people are exactly the same. They like different stuff, right? And that's kind of how you have to treat each guest, is like you have to, and it's a little kind of, I don't know, maybe slightly inappropriate, the example I'm using, but it's just this idea that you have to be present and conform to the individual needs of each individual guest. And this idea of like almost so there's the show, the bigger picture, the dining room floor, but each experience with each guest is like a different set
right.
in the greater show.
Right. And it's a different dance.
Right.
That you have with them.
And I think we need to be just aware of this level of showmanship that goes on. And like, to your point, it can be genuine if there's some purpose back behind it. That like, if our mission is to change the day of each person that comes in here, to leave them a little bit happier and at peace, or whatever that is, and there's purpose in doing that. What's going through your mind?
Well, the last phrase you said is that there's purpose in doing that, right?
Yeah.
That's what intention is, and it's all different levels of purpose. And so I encourage everybody to understand all of those levels, to where everything flows from the meaningful purpose of the organization, of why you exist, to what change you want to be, to your theme of this particular experience. And you have multiple themes. I know a lot of, Chip Conley, the founder of Joie de Vivre Hospitality, used to name his hotels and he had restaurants and spas as well, after different magazines, knowing that if he captures the essence of the magazine as his theme and puts it into his hotel or restaurant, then everybody loves that magazine, is going to naturally gravitate there and love that particular place. So if you have multiple places, right, don't necessarily think about we're going to have chains. No, have as Kimpton Hotel says, have a collection of different hotels, different restaurants. There's a Philadelphia restaurateur that does that. Steven somebody.
Star,
yes.
Yep.
Steven Starr, right. The one I've been to, I remember, is Elvez,
Yeah.
which I love. The Mexican Elvez.
So it's a collection of experiences for different target markets.
Right, exactly. And people will gravitate towards ones, although, everybody can enjoy all of them, but they may have more of an affinity, won't be more of a regular at them. And it could happen you could have different themes or sub-themes for different days of the week, for different meal times and so forth, and have little changes in there in what you're doing, or for special events where we have a show on tonight or whatever it might be.
Yeah. You bring up one other line in the book that I just think is worth surfacing here in today's conversation, this idea of acting, right? And relative to show business, it's an act. And that even that word kind of sounds a little slimy, but like
it's not.
But exactly. You explain why it's not. So get into that.
Yeah, it is. It's actually purely description. So one of the things I love quoting famed stage director in the UK, Peter Brook. He wrote this wonderful little tome called The Empty Space. In the opening line, he says, "I can take any empty space and call it a bare stage. A man walks across this stage while someone else is watching him, and that's all that is needed for an act of theater to be engaged." In other words, the simplest definition of acting is one person watches another person work. And if the guests of your restaurant are watching you work, you're on stage, right? You just can't get around it. You're on stage. And yeah, it means you've got to put emotional labor into it. It means you got to think about what you're doing. It means you can't go on autopilot. It means it's a tougher job than working at a McDonald's. But did you really want to work at a McDonald's anyway?
Right.
So, and guess what? Your tips are going to be commensurate to how well you act.
Right.
And particularly making that personal, emotional connection with each individual guest, if you can.
Back to purpose. And I think that the act is, like, you think of the word act, you think of words like action or take action, right? And if there's a purpose, that you give your team a purpose, if there's something back of that, I feel like you're taking action on following whatever the purpose of your organization is. And when you look at it that way, because what goes through your mind as I share that? In terms of acting and taking action.
Yeah, I mean it's a proactive thing to be able to do. Acting is action. I think I've got a book called Drama Equals Action, in fact.
Yeah.
But it's determining what's the right action at this moment in time.
Right.
Again, and that's street theater again is figuring out what routine that I want to do right now that's going to put the most money in the hat. Right, i.e., give me the biggest tip.
Right, but what is the action? Is it feeding people, or is it something greater?
No, it's everything outside. That's the what. Feeding people's the what.
Right.
It's the how.
Right.
How you do that what. That's
why.
What is the act. Well, then informing it by the why.
Yeah.
Right. So that informs the intentions that you bring to it.
But I think this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have things like a vision, like a mission statement, like core values, because it gives people something to act on.
Right.
And
That's
it's not
a great way of putting it.
Yeah, and it's not just I'm here to feed people, and I think that kind of leads us into the last thing we want to talk about today is this idea of transforming economy, or the transformation economy.
Right.
So when did you come to this realization?
So it was there from the very beginning, right? When I was figuring out the experience economy after that guy had asked me what customization turns a service into, and I realized that there's this heuristic in this progression of economic value from commodities, goods, services to experiences, and then on to transformations, as I'll talk about shortly. And that is that customization is the antidote to commodization. Right? So what happens over time is economic offerings become commoditized, meaning treated like a commodity, where people don't care who makes them. They're about the features or the benefits. They're all pretty much the same anyway. It's where they come to care about three things and three things only, and that's price, price, and price. Right? That's when things have been commoditized. And so as goods became commoditized is when more manufacturers shifted up into services and began customizing the goods. As services became commoditized is with more service companies shifted up into experiences, again, generally giving away the next level of value to better sell what they have today. So I recognized from the very beginning, well, okay, can experiences be commoditized as well? Well, yeah. In fact, experiences may be the easiest economic offering to commoditize because the second time you have an experience doesn't tend to be as good as the first. The third time, not as good as that. And when customers say, been there, done that, right? That's the hallmark of the commoditized experience.
So is that just expecting something?
That you don't offer anything different than they expect, right? It's just if it's the same thing every time, if there's no surprise, if there's no advancement, no innovation, no customization, then it's going to be a commodity over time. So customization is the antidote to that commoditization. You can't help but be differentiated, meaning not a commodity, if you customize to the individual person.
Yeah.
So what happens when you customize an experience?
Yeah, I think this is so important why we get off scripts. Right? I feel like scripts were the way to do things for the longest time until we realized that people just, to your point, the experience became commoditized. But did I cut you short? I apologize.
Yeah, but that's all right. But scripts is a good thing, a good thing to point out because, they're often we tell people what to say, and that can be good in some situations, but in most situations, let them get off script by telling them, here's the intention you want to get across, right? You got the what, you got the how, and here's the why. Now do it in your own way.
Yeah.
Right. Because for some people, scripts becomes rote,
right,
and becomes fake, right. But do it in your own way. Make it fresh and live every time.
Well, it's funny because you talk about in the book, you give, I think it's 4 different types. It's street performance, stage performance, mirror, matching performance, and then there's one other
platform. Right.
Is that different from stage?
Well, actually, platform is a stage. There's improv.
Sorry. So it's improv, stage, match, and street. Or I think maybe, if I'm butchering this, I apologize.
No, that's right. We say improv platform, which is being on stage. Platform is what you're just talking about, where you have a script and you say the same lines every time.
Right. And I think that, I was trying to figure out which one is the restaurant industry, but I think the truth of the matter is we leverage all of those things.
Right. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing to leverage all of them.
So you see, like in fine dining, to me, that's more stage because it's you're setting an expectation, and I think that it's about the execution of the thing over time, like its consistency of finally executing something.
Right.
But then there's street performance in the sense of, and I think that's where we should lean in this direction of customizing the experience, matching the guest in any moment. So whenever they come, we're almost improv street performance. What's going on?
Yeah, that's exactly what street performance is it's mass customizing. You have routines, you have modules, you have bits. In Commedia dell'arte in Italy, they would call them lazzi, or these routines that you do in response particularly to triggers, right?
Yes.
This thing happens, then I do this.
If this, then that.
Right. So let me go back to Pike Place Fish Market, because I love this. They do this little routine where they give the fish CPR, right? They're beating on its heart. They're pretending to blow into its mouth and so forth. And the trigger is whenever they drop the fish. Right, so you throw it up there, and maybe it's a guest that's doing it, and they drop it, and then they have the big look of surprise in their eyes, and they put it down on the counter, and they start giving it CPR. Right, so it's a beautiful routine that recovers from the fact that they just dropped a fish on the floor.
Yeah.
Right, nobody wants to see that. So you can think about that too in terms of when glasses are broken. When a meal is sent back to the kitchen or a wine bottle sent back, what are the routines that you want to be able to recover for that and turn it into an even better experience where you're glad it happened. I mean, it's one of the things you're glad this trigger happened, if something bad happened, so you could show off.
And these are rituals, and you think of like this all ties back to culture. Like this trigger is a ritual to trigger a bit where we recover, and it looks like it's natural, but like you know what I'm saying? Like it's all these little things you can do. You can make them ritualistic and make them a part of your culture. But it's just powerful stuff. I forget where our train of thought was.
So transformations.
Thanks.
Right, so now you've forgotten. I remembered.
Yeah.
So transformations are is when you customize an experience, right? What happens when you design an experience that's so appropriate for this particular person, exactly the experience that they need at this moment in time, then you can't help but turn to what we often call a life-transforming experience, an experience that changes us in some way, and that's a transformation.
So it's a series of experiences over time with an intention, a purpose to change the end user. So I think what you say in the book is that the customer becomes the product.
Right. With transformations, the customer is the product. They have an aspiration. They're hiring you to basically achieve that aspiration. Think about going to a fitness center, right? People only go to fitness centers because they want to go from flabby to fit. And notice the from to, right? It's a key thing with transformations. There's a from and then there's a to. Or maybe I want to get washboard abs, or I want to fit into the swimsuit I did last summer. You have this more customized individual personal aspiration, but generally, flabby to fit is a good general one. And you're hiring them to do it. The problem is most fitness centers are charging you at an experience level with a monthly membership fee. And as long as you pay that fee, they don't care whether you come in or not, right? But when you get to the level of working with a personal trainer, right, who cares and who will do everything it takes to sit on you and get you to fulfill your aspiration, then they recognize that they're in the transformation business.
Right. So Restaurant Unstoppable's mission is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. And I really my mission is to change the world.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can transform the industry, we have the ability to change the world. But I think what I want my listeners to understand that they are in the way we transform the world is by transforming the consumer. So it trickles down.
Right. Right.
I'm here to help you know that you have transformative power. And then if you improve yourself and you improve the people that work for you, you'll improve the communities. So I think the question we need to start asking ourselves is what transformation do we want to provide?
Right.
To our consumer? Are we making them healthier? Are we making them more cautious, mindful of sustainability,
or more adventurous, happier, whatever it is? So in terms of transformation, where are the opportunities for restaurant owners to transform the consumer? Right. So there are, you just listed a number of them. There's basically, those are all the two statements: is what do you want to transform them to? The most obvious one is having something to do with being healthy. But also there are things around opening up your senses, opening up your minds to new possibilities, like becoming more adventurous, being able to taste in different ways and experience in different ways that you can then go apply to other experiences that you have. Understanding the connections. An obvious one also too is turn me into a cook, right? Where I can do this for myself. I'll give you one. One of my favorite examples here is with the name Cacciatore, right? You got to know Italy. Right?
I've heard of Italy. There's one in New York. There's one in Chicago.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to go. You got to go.
You're
it's
right.
the best. It's the most vibrant retail experience in the world. I'm
on my way to Chicago right now.
All right, you got to go to the one in Chicago. My wife recommends the lemon chicken.
Okay.
And so Italy is everything Italian food. In fact, their theme, right? Go back to that theme. Their theme is journey through culinary Italy, right? That's their theme. And so you can see different spots within Italy. They tell you this stuff is from southern Italy, this is northern Italy, and so forth. And so they sell in their commodities, right? You can buy raw fish. You can buy cuts of meat. You can buy organic produce and so forth. They sell physical goods. You can buy cooked pasta. You can buy processed meat and so forth. You can buy utensils and appliances in order to cook Italian food. They sell services, right? The normal merchandising services of all retailers, as well as quick food takeaway. Then they sell experiences. They have a cafe in there. They have usually 2, 3, 4 different restaurants in there. And it's sort of like you're walking around picking up your groceries, and all of a sudden you find yourself in line for a restaurant that you didn't know was there. And it's a wonderful experience that they provide in the restaurant. And then they have an admission fee cooking school. Right, and every one of them, one of New York, they actually have a museum as well, but they have an admission fee cooking school to turn you into an Italian chef. And guess what? You become an Italian chef. What are you going to do?
You're going to buy the goods.
You're going to buy everything they have for sale, including going to the restaurants more to learn new recipes and tastes and so forth. So there's an example of I say it's the most vibrant retail experience in the world, and it's putatively a grocery store, right? That's what you would say it is, but it has all of these things wrapped together into one vibrant place.
So really, let's take this down to a smaller scale. It's where somebody could like with one restaurant kind of replicate this. And I think of like a health food restaurant, right? So like really like you're selling food, but what you're selling, think bigger. How can I transform my target market, my target individual? Where are they trying to be in their life cycle? And how can I help them get there by creating services to steer them in that direction?
So for example,
so this is strategic intent.
Yeah, and one of my nephews worked in the restaurant at Lifetime Fitness, and it's you didn't think of fitness centers as actually having restaurants before they did it that I know of, but you can imagine how can a restaurant in a fitness center fulfill the greater mission of the fitness center, right? For example, by teaching you how to eat well. And it could be based on the things that you're doing in the fitness center and the reason why you're there, and customizing things to them and showing how they can do this for themselves, and how they eat and how they prepare, how they cook.
Right. So like there's a million things we can do today, I think, along that line of like the food as medicine, food as health, where like you can get them to buy into a membership. Right, where you're starting them here and you're getting them there. And part of that is helping them understand, like taking them through the journey of wellness. And what does that look like?
Yes.
Is it just what you eat? No, you might have to get your DNA tested to find out what food is right for you. So you're giving them information, you're walking them down, that you're guiding them through this journey of helping them become the better version of themselves. And hey, guess what? It's not just what you eat. It's your habits and your routines and the people you surround yourself with. So now you can create community to have accountability, to help people get collectively where we're going. And you can't do it on your own, but you can help them find the other thems. Right. So these are all things you can do. And then, hey, like to your point, like we'll feed you. You can come in and eat, but like we'll also send you a customized meal kit specific to you and your DNA coding or whatever your goals are. Right. So now you can tie in the in-store experience to the at-home meal kit delivery experience and be holistic.
Plus giving them the experience of making the food, right? With a mise en place sort of setup. And now we're going to turn you into a chef. And oh, by the way, let me come to your home, right? Cook you a meal there, show you how to use some of the things you've got, the appliances you got here and you haven't.
Yeah.
We'll talk about what's on your shelves and what you need to get rid of and what you need to add and so forth. There's so much you could do with the
lifestyle brand comes to mind. It's really becoming less about just the food, but really a lifestyle and helping people achieve the lifestyle that appeals to their psychographic. Right. And I think there's so many different verticals, but I think it comes back down to conscious capitalism. It's this idea of people. I think we are more mindful, I think it's trendy to work on mindfulness. Like how many like middle-aged white dudes were using words like emotional intelligence 15 years ago, like standard, like IQ, EQ, IQ, like these types of things. Empathy wasn't a common word for most people back in the day. And this idea of just living intentionally and being mindful, I think that's, in my opinion, like I think that's what conscious capitalism is. And I think we're moving away from this place of goods and keeping up with the Joneses. But like, if I want to be seen, like what is the capitalism or the money of the future? I think it's social status based off of how people see me and the good I do. Is that a stretch?
Yeah, well, there's a thinker by the name of Pierre Boudreau who talks about cultural capital. Yeah, and that's, I think, exactly in line with what you're talking about.
And is there? I mean, the economy is better than I do. Is that are we moving in that direction?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and it gets into there's economy in terms of what you are producing, your economic offerings, but there's also in terms of how you run your business, right, and what your way of managing is. And that's where I think that the conscious capitalism and having a meaningful purpose gets into is how are you managing a company? And you need to manage it, as my colleague Kim Korn says, to thrive forever. To have a way of managing that allows you to not rise up and then fall into mediocrity and eventually fail. But how do you thrive forever by constantly regenerating what your competitive advantage is?
I think this is what Simon Sinek calls the infinite game. Right. And we used to be in this game of playing the finite game where it was about being the best. Right. And I think and I know you're an economist in a way. He talks about Adam Smith and going back to the 17th century economist making it about your business is really to add value to everybody it touches. And then Milton Friedman came around in the 1970s and said, no, it's about returning money for stakeholders.
Well, it's not quite what he said, but
what did he say? Help me understand.
Well, it starts with Friedrich Hayek and Joseph Schumpeter.
Yeah.
About the fact that that the economy is about creative destruction, is what Schumpeter said, and what you need in it. So you always have companies that are failing because they don't catch the right wave, because they don't innovate, because they don't work on thriving. And others will come up and supplant them, and then eventually, they'll get thrown down and so forth, is generally what happens. And that's why you need to create as much creative destruction inside the organization and within its ecosystem as there is outside, or eventually the outside swamps you.
Yeah.
Right. And what and Hayek was all about freedom. If you give people freedom to make their choices, they'll make far better choices than the government will in making them for you.
Yeah.
So freedom did say that it is about the owners of the firm and doing what's right for them, but it is, again, relative to having government come in and tell you what to do and how you need to operate, and also in giving you that freedom, but also recognize that what is best for the shareholders is, first of all, best for the customers. And that's what people they think like, we're shareholders at the expense of customers. No, what you want to do is you want to provide your customers with what they want. You give them what they need, what they value, and that will then provide the most return for the shareholders.
Yeah, I think it's just the question. What's been shifting over time is what does the consumer want and value? I think over time it was, more for less. And I think we might be getting away from that. What the consumer now wants, as the consumer becomes a little more conscious, is. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, more for less is basically commoditization. Yeah. Right. And they want to do that with economic offerings, so they get more for less. Right. That makes sense. But they also want different types of things, different qualities of offerings, different economic offerings, including experiences and transformations that right now are. I mean, the theme restaurant industry is one where you could say where that really is an experience that's been commoditized. But otherwise, it resists that commoditization more because it's more personal to you. The experiences happen inside of us in reaction to the events that are staged in front of us. So they're inherently personal, and transformations change us from the inside. So they resist that commoditization more than other economic offerings.
It just feels like we're moving in this direction that we're cutting deeper with the consumer.
Yep.
Is that safe to say?
Yep.
Anything that has not come out.
Well, again, the deeper the consumer, related to what I just said, commodities, goods, services exist outside of us. Experiences, transformations exist inside of us, right? So you are reaching inside of people, and that makes them very different than the prior or the lower level economic offerings.
Got it. Joe, I've really enjoyed today's conversation. I want to respect the time we made here together or set aside. Is there anything we haven't discussed that you think my listeners should hear?
Well, I'll mention one thing that they probably won't know how to operationalize today at all, but maybe 10, 20 years, right? Again, you are what you charge for. What do you charge for transformations? And it's the demonstrated outcome that your customers achieve. Because with transformations, inputs don't matter. It doesn't matter what food we give them. It doesn't matter even the experience they have, unless it makes a difference in their lives, unless it moves them along the path. Generally not one life-transforming experience we have in a restaurant, but something that helps move them along the path of achieving their aspirations. And as you pointed out earlier, that the customer is the product, and therefore you need to charge for that changed customer. And that's charging based off of outcomes rather than inputs.
Their outcomes, the value of
their outcomes. Yeah, not yours, not right, exactly. Their outcomes. Because unless you align, with all offerings, unless you align what you charge for with what your customers value, right, you're not going to create as much economic value. And so what we need to align with transformations is our income with our customers' outcomes.
Yeah. Again, the book is The Experience Economy, Competing for Customers' Time, Attention, and Money. Holding the book up right here. If you're looking at the video, that's what the cover looks like. And you have a couple other books out there. I want to give you an opportunity to plug those guys as well.
Yeah, so we mentioned authenticity. Mm-hmm. What consumers really want. If you really, particularly after reading The Experience Economy, you worry about authenticity and what it means. You have got questions there. That's a book to do. The original book, Mass Customization, is actually out of print finally after about 25 years. And but there are 2 great chapters in The Experience Economy on it. And then there's Infinite Possibility, Creating Customer Value on the Digital Frontier. So that's about how you use digital technology to fuse the real and the virtual, like you see at La Petite Chef restaurants with them putting images down on your plate and having a little character give you a little show on there.
Is that your most recent book?
Yeah, well, before the re-release of The Experience Economy, yeah.
I'm going to have to get my hands on that one for sure. Right. And how can we connect with you if we really enjoyed? I know you guys also, you have your Strategic Horizons where you label yourself a thinking studio dedicated to helping businesses conceive and design new ways of adding value to their economic offerings. So what if we want to outsource you to help us with that?
Yeah, so you can go to strategichorizons.com, strategic horizons with an S.com. And there's and learn all about us. There's a place on the contact page there that if you opt in, you can get our quarterly Field Notes newsletter that talks about some of the interesting things going on in the Experience Economy, as well as talks about our events and our writings. So we publish something new, we ship it out there, and we have our our Experience Economy Expert Certification course. You can find out about there. We do coaching for chief experience officers called X-Coach. And you can always just LinkedIn with me. Joe Pine on LinkedIn will get you right to me. And so we can always have a conversation there.
Beautiful. And this is episode 1053.
Woo!
Yeah. Head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/1. Actually, I'm sorry. It's 1054. So head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/1054. We'll have a summary of today's discussion as well as any links to the books recommended. We'll have a link to The Experience Economy. We'll have links to connect with Joe, his LinkedIn account. And Joe, this is where I say, actually, I am curious. Who do you think I should talk to? This is something I usually ask all my restaurateur guests to recommend me to the next restaurant owner doing good stuff. But in terms of authors out there, people who are really challenging the status quo and thinking, like, what's that next level of thinking that I should be on my radar?
Oh, well, there are so many interesting things out there. There's a number of books on experiences, including James Wallman's Stuffication and Time and How to Spend It. Are great books. Matt Dearden and Bob Rossman have a book on designing experiences. I'm just reading a book by Brad McLean on designing transformative experiences, which is quite interesting to take you to that next level. We're currently in my conference room, so we walk out the doors. We'll have my office, which is wall-to-wall books and so forth, and some I haven't classified yet, so I can easily point out some further ones for you as well.
Thank you very much, Joe. And this is where I say there is no questioning, my man. You are unstoppable.